Do you see these as 2 silvers gained or 2 golds lost?
I'm the most decorated female free skier in history. I think that's an answer in and of itself.
Watch her face in that clip. You can see the exact moment the question lands and the minute her annoyance triggers her defensive response. And here's why I think that this would be useful for every founder to study, because you're bound to face questions like this from investors, from customers, and better yet, your own family members. On the work front, it could be about, your sales revenue, about why aren't you shipping faster, about a feature that you should include like long ago, about your current startup status, and why are you still a startup after 3 years? And the question is always the same underneath, and it is about, are you sure you know what you're doing? So how you answer that question under pressure is a skill. And today we're gonna talk all about that. Let's start with what the reporter actually asked Eileen Gu, because it wasn't a neutral question. It was a binary trap. The way the question was phrased forces you into one of the 2 losing answers. If you say 2 silvers gained, you sound like you're lowering the bar for yourself. And if you say 2 golds lost, you just agreed that you failed. So either way, the framing wins, but you as the responder lose. So founders get questions like this constantly. Questions such as, is this a pivot? Or are you kind of telling me that what you did before wasn't working? Is this a down round, or is this a sign that the company is struggling? Same trap, different vocabulary. So why is it so hard to escape in that moment? When your competence or status gets questioned publicly, your brain processes it as a threat, not a question. The same circuitry that handles physical danger activates. Your thinking narrows. Your instinct is to attack the attacker to re-establish dominance. You've seen it before. You've seen an athlete snapping at a reporter in this case. A founder gets visibly irritated at a question from a LP. A CEO may dismiss an analyst on a call. The status alarm went off, and instead of managing it, they let it run. So how would you fix something like this? Well, there are 3 steps that we can take before we open our mouth to respond. First of all, acknowledge the stink. Whatever it is that hurt your ego, identify it, name it before you come up with the answer. It helps to name the emotion. Second, try to put yourself in the perspective of the person. Identify the intention. Is the person being malicious? Are they hunting for a story? Most of the time, reporters, investors, and even hostile podcast hosts, they're not the enemy. They're just doing a job. And that reframe alone can drop your threat response by half. And finally, you can pivot from defending your identity to defining the standard. So there is that shift. So you can stop arguing about whether you've won or lost by the way that they framed it. Instead, you can introduce a completely different frame. And the goal is to move from, I need to protect myself, to, you know what, I have the opportunity to define and set the terms here. So that's not spin, that's strategic repositioning. Here's the complication with Eileen Gu specifically, and with a lot of founders, if we're honest. Eileen Gu is young, wealthy, extraordinarily talented, conventionally attractive, and at the time of this interview, already a global brand. She had sponsorship deals that most Olympic athletes never see. So in 2026, that profile does not give you sympathy by default. It gives you the opposite. So there's this dynamic whereby the public's tolerance for perceived arrogance would scale inversely with the perceived privilege. So if you are already winning at life by visible matrix, defending yourself reads as punching down. The audience doesn't root for you to win the argument. They are rooting for the reporter. And so founders should be aware of this. Once you are a visible personality, a bad answer in a podcast interview doesn't read as you being misunderstood. It could read as you being precious. So what's the counter move? Eileen Gu actually deployed this partially. She mentioned, almost in passing, the physical difficulty of competing in 3 separate disciplines back to back at the same Olympic Games. That is a high signal data point. So most people watching had no idea that this was even happening. So that single detail rehumanizes her and her achievement. It moves the story from, oh, she just won a silver, it moves the story from she won silver instead of gold to she did something almost no one in the world could physically survive. Eileen Gu voluntarily lowered her status in small visible ways by pointing out facts that the mainstream audience wouldn't know. So you can't knock somebody off a pedestal that they themselves didn't build. The reframing can be something like her being humble about her achievement, but confident in the effort that she's put in. This will show people that she's not a braggart and that she's put in extreme passion and dedication to her sport. So that answer doesn't need defending. It reframes the entire conversation and shuts it down. Now let's talk about what Eileen Gu actually did in that moment when the reporter asked her about the question whether she saw her win as 2 silvers won or 2 golds lost. At that moment, Eileen Gu laughed and it went viral. People called it savage and some people called it confident and dismissed the question as a silly question. But watch it again with the sound off. She laughed at the question, which means the camera caught her signaling that the reporter and the question were beneath her. And while it was satisfying for her to do, it was a terrible thing to have happened because the laugh communicated that she found the question so ridiculous and she found that perspective so low that she didn't even want to dignify it with a straight answer. So everyone who doesn't know the context would then judge the situation superficially. What Eileen Gu could have done was to acknowledge the question sincerely instead of directly mocking it. Assume the perspective of somebody who isn't as familiar with the sport as Eileen Gu is. And so that establishes empathy and also the patience to educate and inform the journalists on what it's really like out there in the snow, and that getting a silver is not considered a loss. And that way, it actually shows that you are humble, patient, empathetic, and that you're bringing the journalists along into your world for them to better understand so that they can ask better questions in the future. So let's translate this into the founder world. When an investor asks you something that reveals they don't understand your market, you could scoff at them, roll your eyes, or reply with a sarcastic response, or correct them in a sincere way, or to treat every under-informed question as a consultation opportunity. So it shows you where your previous explanation has broken down. So just as that common saying goes, there are no stupid questions. So just give everyone the benefit of the doubt, be kind, be sincere, and treat every question as an opportunity to inform. There is a way to defend your wins and your achievements without losing your audience. Everyone would get hit with a bad question or two, and the ones who have built a response architecture before the question arrives are the true winners. Because you can never avoid misinformation or misinformed questions or questions with bad intentions, but you can definitely control your response and frame it to your advantage.